All right, as you can see, I have enough material on that handout to last well beyond 8 o'clock. But before I jump into it, tell me, what did you like about the book? Give me a page number, give me a kind of a paragraph or where on the page it is, and tell me what did you like.
Page 58, the second to the last paragraph. It says, an infinite mind simply cannot comprehend. A finite mind cannot comprehend an infinite being beyond what he has expressly revealed to us. Because of this, some things about God will forever remain a mystery to us. The relationship of the sovereign will of God to the freedom and moral responsibility of people is one of those mysteries.
And that is true. And that's always going to be the rub. But what we want, though, from our studies here for the next, I don't know, about 8 weeks or however many weeks we got, is that we want to be able to give a somewhat of an answer. So why did this tragedy happen? Why didn't God give him this job that could really be a sweet deal? Why? And we have to come up with some answer. Ultimately, you're right, Steve. The ultimate answer is we just need to trust God. Okay, but why do we trust God? Or how do we know that God is trustworthy? So we have to come up with some answers, and even in your own lives, because that's what I said last week, and there's some chapter 3s laying around here. Some of the questions were in your specific trouble or struggle that you're dealing with, how does this, referencing the page number, help you? So, unless we need to walk away from here by the end of the study, that if someone comes up to you and says, why did God allow my 3-month-old baby to get cancer and spend 6 months in the hospital and die? And you need to have something more than trust God. I mean, that's the right answer, but they're not going to accept that. That's not going to be any help to them. So yes, we will end up, though, Steve, with the end of the conversations we have with that grief-struck parent, that there's a finite mind trying to understand the infinite, and we're never going to get there. But here's some ways that you could trust God. So anyway, but excellent. Good. Anyone else?
So the mystery that I have, I can't wait to find out the answer to. Like when God causes the Assyrians, I think it was Assyrians, to attack Israel. And they did. And then he punished the Assyrians for attacking Israel. Like, wait a second.
Yep.
What's going on here?
Yep.
So that's like one of them things that I can't wait to figure out or find out the answer to that. You know what I mean? What are you doing here?
Again, as you saw it, he did mention that in the book.
Yeah, I
somewhat.
exactly.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Good. Anyone else?
I guess it's on page 49, where it says if God controls the king's hearts, surely he controls everyone else's, and he cites the 2 kings, Cyrus and Darius, where Cyrus was allowing the Jews to rebuild the temple, and then Darius allowed them to continue the work on the temple.
Yes. Yes. And we're going to get into in our discussion aspects about that. There on page 49, there in the middle. If God controls the king's heart, surely he controls everyone else's. So, yeah, so then just what does that mean in our daily routines? And again, it's easy when everyone's being nice to us. Our struggle always seems to be when difficulty comes, and he addresses that near the end of the book, which again, I just wrote ouch in the margin. Actually, I was going to put Tina wise up in the margin, but I didn't. I just put ouch instead. Okay, anyone else? All right, let's look at these verses. that's on the handout. I didn't take all of them from the book, but I took some that I thought were significant. Genesis 26 on the top of your handout there. Then God said to him in a dream, I know that thou have done this in the integrity of your heart. And it was I who kept you from sinning against, this is interesting, me, not Abraham. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. So ladies, I know this is a horrible story, but any of you ladies want to go to the back story to this? What did Abraham do to his wife?
Gave her to the king.
Yeah, you know, the Pharaoh thought, man, this is a good looking woman. I want to add her to my harem. And Abraham said, sure, take her. Fine, that's fine. She's only my sister. Trying to save his neck. Well, while in the harem, as you found out and as you read there, he did not have relationships with Abraham's wife. And the reason is there is according to Genesis 20. I know you did this in the integrity of your heart. I kept you from sinning against me by having relationships with Abraham's wife. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. So put that in your own words. We got to let this meditate or just kind of marinate there in our heads a little bit. Well, what's he doing?
Whatever he pleases.
Hmm?
Whatever he wants to do.
Whatever he wants to do, but in specific in relationships with human beings. What did he do? What did God do?
Guiding us.
He kept them from sinning.
Okay, good.
What about when he doesn't though?
Well, we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah. It seems to me that he protected Sarah.
Sarah, yeah?
I
So-
didn't have the impression that she wanted to be there.
Yeah. Which again, when we get into Peter, it's a pretty significant portion of scripture considering what Abraham did. But here's where I was going with this, and there's a little bit of speculation, but obviously somehow did God, even though he initially saw her and they brought her to him, initially somehow God did not create any desires for her within Pharaoh's heart. How he did that, we don't know. Distractions, a myriad of other women, and she was number 600 in line or something, whatever it is. We don't know. But the point is that God said, I kept you from sinning.
So
So-
God works in the unsaved as well as the saved.
Yes, as we'll see again with the rebuilding of the wall. He does that again. And then, even as it goes a little further, therefore I did not let you touch her. So again, it's not just that God is moving within the heart of this Pharaoh, this king, but also God is not, he's working through circumstances to actually prevent him from doing it. Right? Is that too far of a stretch? All right, so here's another instance in Genesis 34. I just forgot her name. Starts with the D. The gal who was raped. Thank you. And we know what happened. They tricked the offenders by saying, you guys get circumcised, we'll let you marry our daughters. Well, then they got circumcised, and then they went there and they slaughtered everybody. And then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you brought trouble on me by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land. You tricked these folks and you slaughtered them. The Canaanites, the Perizzites, I can't speak. Thank you, I can't even say marinate, but that's all right. My numbers are few, And if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household. So then we drop down just a couple of verses to chapter 35, verse 5. And as they journeyed, a terror from God fell upon the cities that were around them, so that they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. What's God doing here?
Protecting them
Okay,
by making everybody scared of them.
yeah. So you got, in a way, competing emotions, because loved ones were tricked and killed when they were kind of incapacitated, so it wasn't even a fair fight, so to speak. So they've been tricked, they've been slaughtered, we want revenge. So that's kind of a powerful motive. We want justice. That might be a pretty powerful motive. And yet, the terror from God fell upon the cities that they did not pursue them. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on here, right?
So even when we displease God, He still protects us.
Yep. Which we see that with Abraham, and I didn't put the second instance, but that happened to Abraham twice. Because twice he kind of told a semi-fib and said, yeah, she's not my wife, she's my sister, and threw her under the bus, and both times there was no retribution, and in fact one time he was blessed as a result of it. So any comments there in Genesis 20 or 34, 35 before we go into the Exodus? Okay, Exodus 12. Okay, so God tells Moses, when you leave, you will be able to leave with the plunder of Egypt, which again, what has happened the 7 years prior? Why did Israel, oh, I'm sorry, why did Israel get there in the, wait, oh man, I'm all messed up. How did they start, how did they initially get into the land?
Because of Joseph.
Yeah, because the famine, right?
Yeah.
And it was because people were selling their animals off, and then they'd sell their jewelry off, and then they'd sell themselves off and sell everything off just to survive.
They were slaves of Egypt.
Yeah, they were probably the number one powerhouse.
They were working for the man.
Yep, they were working for the man. So now when they go to plunder them, not only were they still a very rich nation, but they also needed capital to start this new, coming over on the Mayflower and starting a new land, a new government, new country, new everything. It took money. So, notice what he does there in verse 36 of chapter 12. So the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so they let them have whatever or what they asked. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. And again, I guess this is a little easier to understand, having gone through the plagues of Egypt. It's like, buddy, get out of here. Anything you want, leave. But, you know, God was working there. He gave them favor. And again, this cost them. You know, they could have been giving up grandma's brooch. I don't know if they had any great grandma's china or crystal, but what they asked, you know, I'm sure for some of them was like, ooh, little mixed emotions. I mean, I want to give it, but this has been my family for a long time, or this is really special because my husband bought this for me for my whatever. But they gave it to him. Here's another interesting one here about protection. In Exodus 34, 3 times in a year, all the males appear before the Lord. And as our Bridges pointed out, why is that so significant in a very scary way that all the males?
Now we have to protect the females and the children.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, talk about vulnerability. That's like, not only do you forget to lock your house, you turn on all the lights and you put a big old arrow out with some sort of a marquee sign says nobody's home, help yourself. And the thing is that this happens year after year after year, exactly at those 3 feasts that we just read about, so they know exactly when it's going to happen. Year after year after year. And being an opportunist, I'd say, hey, yeah, why not? Let's just go take it. They're all down in Jerusalem. Well, here's what he says there. No one shall covet your land. No one's going to want it. No one's going to take it. It's going to be just as messy when you return as when you left it. No, I'm not just kidding. But it'll be just as you left it. No one's going to covet your land. And I like the development that he had in the book about that idea of coveting. There's an emotion to that. There's mindset. There's thinking. And yet God says they're not going to covet that. Ezra. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, the word of the Lord came by the mouth of Jeremiah to be fulfilled. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia. This is God doing it. So they made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and also put it in writing. I dropped down a few verses. I didn't put all the way there, but God stirred up Cyrus to make this decree that they could do it. But then also, it wasn't just the king's heart that God stirred up, because in verse 5, then rose up the heads of the fathers' houses of Judah and Benjamin, the priests, the Levites, everyone whose spirit God had stirred up to rebuild the house. And again, not many of us like change. And they've been in there for a long time, and they've got their garden set up, and they got, everything going, and they got their pediatricians, and they got their doctors and everything else, and now we want you to leave and go back to, well, what Grandpa was talking about, just a pile of rubble, and start over again? Man, no. I got nice drinking water. I got this garden I planted. I got grapes that are finally starting to come, and I got to leave all of it? But the reason they did was because God had stirred up those hearts. Ezra 6, they kept the Feast of Unleavened Breads with joy, for the Lord made them joyful and had turned the heart of the king of Assyria to them, so that he, the king of Assyria, aided them in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel. Like, that makes no political, financial sense at all. Like, you already defeated this enemy, the foreign God and everything. Why in the world are you going to help build them up
Finance it.
again? Yeah, why are you going to finance it? They're just troublemakers. They're just going to make trouble for you again. Like, this is stupid. Sometimes we shake our head with what's going on currently. Whatever. And then Proverbs 21:1, the heart of the king is like a stream of water in the hand of the Lord, and he turns it wherever he wills. That's why we continue to pray for those in leadership over us, whether it's the Bucks County down there on Flowers Mills, or whether it's up there in Doylestown, or whether it's up in wherever it is. Isaiah 45, I am the Lord. There is no other. Besides me, there is no God. I equipped you. And we know that. You got all these people coming out to build the tabernacle. I don't think I'm quite there yet, where he takes this one individual and he gives them all this wisdom and knowledge to make all these pomegranates, the ark, all this stuff that they're supposed to make. They were just making bricks. And I know they were making clothing and other domestic things, but nothing on this scale. And yet God gave them the wisdom to do that. Daniel 1, God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the eunuch, which is pretty important, because the eunuch says there in verse 10, you want me to risk my neck? But God overpowered even the desire for life, that he said, okay, we'll give you a period of time, and we'll give it an experiment and we'll see. And then notice what we have in the New Testament. Thanks be to God who put into the heart of Titus. God put in Titus's heart the same care, concern, love for the brother that Paul had. But this is again, I think, Richard, you mentioned it about what about the negative people, and then again, Steve, you mentioned it in a positive way, because notice how this verse plays out. God put the care in Titus's heart, right? Isn't that what it says? Okay. But being himself very earnest, he's going to you of how? His own free will. That's his free choice. So again, there's that balance that we are not going to be able to completely figure out all the nuances of it. All right, any comments on the scripture? Otherwise, we've got 12, and we got about 12 minutes. We can only spend 1 minute per question. Ready? Go. All right, so this is kind of the nuts and bolts, and there's some prompts to help you if you can't maybe come up with a good answer on the page numbers listed. But how are we to respond when we find ourselves in the hand of someone else, when we desperately need a favorable decision? I want the variance. I want the promotion. I want the new job. I want the neighbor to stop. I don't know, whatever we want. On the act of the person's part. How do we respond? And then how should God's sovereignty shape that response? So what do we do?
Trust in God and pray about it.
Okay. And that is one of the steps he lists there in the chapter a little bit further on, is to pray. And then trusting God, good. I think worry, fear, anxiety could be lessened if we just kind of say, I guess God has got this. Any other comment? Otherwise, as Rich brought up, number 2, how do we respond when someone's out to harm us? They are out to get you. They are doing everything they can on social media to throw you under the bus. They want this to just hurt very, very bad. Malice is seeping from their pores. They want you fired. You know, age discrimination is definitely alive and well, and to think if you could get rid of me, you could hire someone at half. We could save all that money and get more work out of them too. So let's get rid of these old guys and get these young bucks in. Let's get rid of them. So they're out to harm you. Can we trust God to intervene? Now notice the way I wrote this question. Can we trust God to intervene in the heart of that person so that he does not carry out his evil intent?
No, because it might be God's will to carry out that evil intent because he's orchestrating your life anyway.
Yeah, on my copy I have a little parenthesis, be careful now to think this through. Because unfortunately, from a sinful human being, does God allow suffering in our lives?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we would set ourselves up to be very disappointed if we prayed, begged, plead, fasted, and what other outside rituals we want to go through, thinking that's going to gain more favor with God, so that he does not carry out his evil intent. But what happens if it is God's will for us to suffer? Because according to the sanctification process, is suffering a bad thing?
No.
No. Can't believe we said that.
You know what to say. It's just hard to do.
It's so hard to do. It is so hard to do. But how do we respond? we respond. And again, you know, whenever we get into a real tough, difficult situation, I don't know if it's what we were talking about Tuesday night or Tuesday, Steve, or we did it on Saturday morning, but, you know, the why is an okay place to start, because all of the lament psalms start that way. Why have you forsaken me? You know, Christ on the cross. Why have you hid your face from me? Why do I have to cry myself to sleep every night? You know, surely God is good to Israel, Psalm 73. But as for me, yeah, God, not so much. Why? But usually, like in Psalm 13, and I know that's the one I keep saying, but it's such a nicely laid out psalm, 6 verses. 2 questioning, 2 pleading, 2 trusting. 2, 4, 6 verses. And that's just the progression we have to go to. So we do need to sometimes know why when we are having difficulty down on us, because it could be that God is saying, listen, I have been trying to shape you into my image through these nice little whispers, and my grace and my goodness, and it's the goodness of God sometimes that leads us to all kinds of good things, but you're not listening. So I'm done whispering, and now I got to knock you alongside of the head, take away what you think you so much cherish or what you have elevated to godship position, and then maybe you can turn back to me. So sometimes it's why, but most of the time it's just how. How can I glorify you in this situation? How can I become more like you in this situation? How can I love others in this situation? How can I use my experience, as Paul wrote there in Corinthians? We are comforted in all of our afflictions so that what? And we can help comfort others. So what kind of a ministry am I going to get from this? Or as I oftentimes pray, I say, you know, God, I don't want this just to be good for me, you know, turn out good. I'm looking for something like Joseph, generational good. I mean, if I got to go through this, you know, I just don't want it to turn out good for me in heaven. You know, I'm looking for something that's going to impact a lot of people for a long time. Like, since I saw her the other day on the video, Johnny Erickson. Remember Johnny Erickson? Johnny and Friends? Now, if she didn't break her neck, do you think she'd be as popular as she is today?
Wow.
No. No, I'm saying I want my broken neck? No, God, I'm not saying that. I like being a very teeny little fish in a huge, gigantic ocean. Nobody has to ever know me. That's fine. Little ministry, I'm okay with that. But the point is that I don't know if Johnny prayed this, but she probably could have prayed, listen, God, if I got to break my neck as a teenager, I just don't want to survive. I want this to be a ministry that is international, worldwide, and has been going for decades, and will probably still go for decades until she dies. That's what I want, and that's what we should be asking for, rather than having these little pity parties. Oh God, why me? Well, again, since we talked, I think it was last week with this, or downstairs, the books are so concurrent, you got the Bible storyline. Paradise, perfect, Genesis 1 and 2. Genesis 3, pain, suffering, death, till Revelation and the end state. So why? Because we're in the time of brokenness. We rebelled against God. Why my child? Well, if you want to go all the way back to the beginning, because Adam and Eve blew it. They chose rebellion, and we all sin by nature and by choice. There's none righteous, no, not one. So we're all in this broken period of time that has lasted a long time. Okay, number 3. Knowing that God can and does work in actions and emotions of people to accomplish His will, how should that truth affect our response? So any conversations we had here before the service was not by chance. God orchestrated that before the foundation of the world. How should we respond to that? And if we have any conversations as our way out the door,
God's not going to allow anything to take place in your life that He doesn't ordain,
yep,
no matter what it is.
yep. This is part of God's will for you. It's God's will. Now, we may not like it, And we might have wished that instead of given a harder job, that we would have been given a promotion, but still God's will. So drop down to 4 then. How should this affect the way we pray about the difficult situations we are in because of other people? This would be a good one for the Ukrainians, right? How should this truth that God is sovereign affect the way they pray about the horrific experiences that they are now going into year number 4 because of Putin?
God sure is watching over them.
Okay,
Ask for guidance. Pray for guidance.
okay, guidance.
Ask what God's teaching us, not what we want him to do.
Yep,
Ask God to soften the heart of Pharaoh.
yeah, exactly. Soften the heart of Putin. But again, glorify God. Therefore, whether you eat, drink, whatever you do. So God, how can you get the glory out of this? How can I become more like you? How can people see my life and use that as like Paul said, follow my example. As I'm a follower of Christ, be a follower of me. Well, in order for that to be a good thing, I got to be leaving a good example. How does our reaction in difficult situation with difficult people reveal our trust in God? What do you think?
Well, if you choke them in a nice way, then it's,
Well, you could witness to them, if you were to die within the next 30 seconds. But see, this is where it really starts getting a little uncomfortable. Difficult situation with difficult people, and we all have them. They're all around us. How does that reveal our trust in God? Yeah, I guess that one kind of slipped through God's plan. Yeah, I don't think God knows what he's doing there. So, yeah, since we don't want to really dig into that too deep. What about 6? Knowing that God works in actions and in people's hearts, what should be some of the specific requests that we can pray this week? And he does list them there, and some of them were already said, so go ahead and parrot it back to me again. Okay, we need to pray, and that was a good thing that we said at the very beginning. Trust God, pray. Okay, good. Pray what? What are some of the things that we could pray for, knowing that God works in the actions and in the hearts of people?
that he would reveal his will for you.
Good. Now, sometimes again, and I keep saying it, but I can't think of a better good thing, and as you're getting older, I guess new, fresh ideas don't come. But it's not going to be pain-free, problem-free prosperity. And we just keep pushing that down God's throat. We just keep pushing it and pushing it. And sometimes it's not even for me. It's like, Tina, you got to get her saved. God, why don't you save Tina? You're not willing that any should perish. God, why don't you do that? Why don't you help them? Or somebody with a physical condition. God, why don't you heal them? We got the medical science, they got good insurance. Why do they have to suffer so long? God, why can't you? Why can't you? And we don't really, as you say, God, what are you trying to teach me here? Kind of show me your will. We don't show him our will. As Andrew said, we demand our will upon him. Did you were going to say something, Don?
Well, just pray that God would help me to love them the way that he wants me to love them rather than the way I think that they deserve to be loved.
Oh, no, that's pretty big. Because what's the gospel, especially when it comes to people?
You gotta love them. You gotta forgive them, even if they don't ask for forgiveness. You just gotta...
Yep, you got a holy, right, justice, perfect, loving God who then, Romans 5:8, demonstrates his love while we were looking at all those websites, stealing all that money, lusting, envying, bitter, whatever else we were doing, and yet God died for us. And just that grace and mercy that he bestowed and still bestows on, well, we need to be doing that to others. You know, we are so gracious that God chased after us and while we were yet sinners, and yet we would never do that the same. Man, I'll tell you what, say one cross thing to me, I ghost you. You're done. That's it. Poof. So, yes, there's a lot of things we can pray for. You can look at page 58, 61 through 63. Biblically untreated or treated unfairly there in number 7. Have we responded towards them and more importantly towards God biblically? And for the most part, the answer is no. No. You know, it is not what Jesus said there in the Beatitudes. We are to bless those who, and pray for those who, you guys could fill in the blanks if you wanted to.
Persecute you.
Persecute you,
Use you.
despitefully use
Use you.
you. Yeah, we don't do that so much. And now with such a big city that, you know, back in the day when you just had your little village and you were constantly bumping into these people, you had to somehow do that. But, you know, it's kind of interesting, you know, we've had people leave the church for all kinds of reasons and they'll say, yeah, you know, we'll just keep, you know, whatever. I don't think I've ever bumped into any of them once at Sam's or Redner's or Giant. That's basically the scope of our existence. we don't get out much. And with her working weekdays and I work nights, and yeah, well, whatever. But the point is that we don't have to respond to them in a biblical way because we're not going to see them again, really. I mean, we're just not. You know, right here, you just don't see people. And then towards God, oh man, I shake my fist at him. If it's not pain-free, problem-free prosperity, I got a problem with him. And I remind him of that often, especially when problems come up. And especially when like the boiler goes out, it's like, God, seriously, $600 plus then a few other bills. $700 that stupid boiler cost us.
Thank God he gave you the money to fix it, brother.
Thank you for that. No, I thought you were going to give me the money for that.
No, that's not what I meant.
But, you know, God, we got some big expenditures this year, and like, seriously, God, we need some prosperity. In fact, you know what? I'm going to start getting some oil. And if you guys give me a lot of money with faith, man, all your problems will go away.
Sow seed.
Now, okay, here's another thought here. No, and then, yeah, we'll get down, we'll skip 9, I guess. But look at number 8, bitterness. Because again, I've said it many times, but you know, it's true, none of us, our lives have not turned out the way we thought they were going to. Never does. Now, sometimes it's good. Wow, I never thought I'd end up like this. But most of the times it's like, yeah, I never thought I had a different trajectory. I just never thought it was going to turn out this way. So the bitterness, how does our bitterness, and then you got bitterness towards people. Because man, people are rough. It's like that book we have here, Relationships, a mess. But it's a mess worth making. So how does that deny God's sovereignty? If he is controlling Pharaoh, Cyrus, etc., if he's controlling to some degree Titus, how does that factor into our bitterness?
If something's happening in your life and you're bitter over it, you're telling God, whatever you're doing for me is not good enough.
Right. Pain-free, problem-free prosperity. Yeah.
I think we're bitter because we had our plans,
You want it. Yeah.
you know, and when our plans are changed, And we don't know what the outcome's gonna be because we didn't make them plans.
Yep.
That's where the bitterness comes in.
Yep. Exactly.
Why do I have to go through this anyway?
I know. Like that could be all done. All right, let me just show this, the focus applications, and then we need to go to page 62 as we close, because this kind of helps summarize this whole chapter, especially as we deal with God is in control. So then, as Rich said, so what happens when it doesn't turn out for good? And he brought up James and Peter's mother in the previous chapter. All right, number 1, focused application. Bridges mentions the problems of God's sovereignty. And we've struggled with that, but you know what? There's another flip side to this coin. And the flip side of that coin is, how can God's sovereignty fill our hearts with enduring peace right now? And I'll tell you, it should. And I just put down a couple popular verses there. You know, Romans 8:29, it's going to work towards your conformity to the image of God. And then as we get down into 31 and following of Romans 8, who is going to lay a charge against God's elect? I am convinced that neither height nor depth nor whatever else is going to separate me from the love of God. So I am so glad that there's a sovereign God, that there's nothing or no one that's going to separate me from God's love. But as I said Sunday morning, that's dependent upon your relationship with God, because otherwise that's what a big deal that is. Give me $100, I'd rather $100. But with that relationship with God, that nothing or no one can separate me from his love, wow, that's huge. That's pretty big. We need to pray, since God does prompt people to go places, to do such things, we should really start really praying that God would prompt young families to come. Right? You can do that to Titus, New Testament, pharaohs or whatever, emperors in the Old Testament. Yeah, he could do that. That wouldn't be such a bad thing to do. And then here's where we need to also for ourselves and then for others, as someone mentioned, we need to be praying for God to move hearts to repentance. I appreciated Bobby's request a while ago. I still pray it, that hearts would be tender towards God. But as he says there in Psalm 68, dyslexia, Psalms 86, unite my heart. So God, in your sovereignty, because again, with that January 11th, those 5 principles for change, God has to be involved. God, you got to do work too, though. You need to unite my heart to fear your name. So go to page 62. 62. On the bottom paragraph. Why then do we suffer with such disappointments when the hoped for favor that we needed from another person doesn't materialize? Why do we struggle with resentment and bitterness? Okay, here's the ouch sentence. Is it not because our plans, stink? No pain-free life tomorrow. Yeah, I'm meeting with Andrew tomorrow for lunch, so that's going to be, well, actually, there, Andrew. But probably more so with you. That's going to be a problem. Our plans have been dashed, or our pride has been wounded. And then he talks about this idea here. We must learn to live with a single agenda. And it's not yes, dear. Sorry, wives. It's a single agenda, and that on the top of page 63 is whose agenda? So again, as I've said, and we've all said it, and we all know it, but sometimes we forget it. Every time we finish up our prayer list and we do that, we say, your will be done. Your will be done. I would sure like to have a nice whatever tomorrow, and I'd like Friday to do this, God, but it's your will be done, because then if it doesn't happen that way, then I'm not gonna become so bitter, angry, and my hopes aren't going to be as dashed, because even though I made a plan, because we're not talking about being sluggard and being lazy, but we hold the plans out open-handed. It's your will be done. That helps a lot. All right, any concluding comments, thoughts?